this is then not clicking on the microphone. So we'll get back in. I will do it later, but sometimes we want to repeat the session. Okay, so we have executive door closing, right? Can you hear me with this? Okay, perfect. Okay, so these three names in the books, who have received a book, a physical copy? Most of you, okay. Not all, okay. The session is about, okay, what was our motivation? Why did we actually write another book, right? So whom is this book for, right? So it's hopefully also for you. So hopefully we will address some of you thing. And then also our idea is how to read the book, right? So there's different ways to read a book, right? So the simple answer is from start to finish, but we had a couple of discussions with real readers already, I think, and they have all different approaches. So I think that's what we also will talk, and then we will also unveil certain areas of the books, and I think some of the use cases in the book will also be being talked through. So that is a big, and then ideally also questions who had already read a chapter or more than a page in the book. Not yet. Ah, okay. Tonight or before? Okay, before. Okay, that's good. So why another book? And I think some of these things are obvious because we started to think about it prior to this hype got that big, right? So we see these technology transformations, evolutions, still growing complexities. We also see that in the past there have been architecture frameworks like TOGAF. We perceive them as very static. And is that going on well? Okay, good. I think, and then we think that our architecture transformation should be more flexible. And we had a lot of ideas, and we want to write those down. And also the tool perspective is evolving a lot. So I think that also was another idea to put it in context to the methodology. Often you have either methodology or tools, but I think we want to steer it all together from all the different dimensions. And most important, maybe not most important, but also very important for us is, okay, to help give guidance how to set up an enterprise architecture practice. So that practice is an element in the methodology, in the framework, and therefore also an important chapter to overcome isolated enterprise architecture islands which still exist. And often there's actually an SAP island and an enterprise architecture island not talking to SAP. And so I had a nice discussion with the customer last night over dinner as well. He said, yeah, it's exactly what is happening. And I think we try to overcome that one as well. So in the end, it's about demystifying enterprise architecture because, okay, yes, this is a big learning event, but I think the learning should not be, okay, now we are closer to be the superhero, but we try to, okay, well, it's actually with our efforts, we make it more approachable, and a learning event helps with that one. The book might help with that one as well. then the title of the book had enterprise architecture, planning, management, transformation. You can argue why these three titles, and a simple answer might be a suppressed thought. Okay, well, maybe people could Google more for planning or for management, and that's why they want to have the three titles. But when we thought it through and say, hey, maybe it's good to describe that. I think it's not just to plan and put a nice to-be picture on the wall. It's also that while you want to manage enterprise architecture in your enterprise ongoingly, and in the end, the transformation aspect is you want to have a prediction on multiple steps. You want to compare different options of enterprise architecture. So I think therefore, instead of just have one nice target drawing versus reasoning about the different transition options, that is what transformation stands for. And that therefore it's a kind of an evolution of the terms planning, management, and transformation. So that is why we in the end ended up with all three of them in the book title. So who's this book for? Well, for sure it's for enterprise architects, but I think maybe enterprise architects, okay, well, enterprise architects love to read about enterprise architecture. And if it's SAP with enterprise architecture, it's probably for SAP professionals, but it's not, maybe it's not only for you if you think you are in the middle area. We believe it's also for the rest of the SAP professionals to understand better about enterprise architecture. And I think the guy I talked last night, he was more in that area and said, okay, his architects, they didn't see the need to come here, right? So and they say, okay, give them the book and then talk to each other and then see how these areas can work together. And also for C-levels, right? So to help them understand the value of enterprise architecture. We see a lot of C-levels who grew through the ranks and they are more technical these days. And therefore, some had been SAP professionals in the past. I haven't seen yet a C-level who was an enterprise architect before, but I think also addressing this to the C-level for us is an important thing because we believe enterprise architecture can be used. Are those the only groups who could be interested? No, I think there are actually more, right? So there is project management office, data office, technology, process owners, and if you spin it further, you might even talk to procurement and finance and corporate strategy. Because in the end, corporate strategy, maybe those guys are not talking to enterprise architects, but we as enterprise architects believe that we can help them. So the ecosystem is very broad. So maybe not all of them will buy the book, but I think the idea is we want the ecosystem you as an enterprise architect you need to be aware of and work with. Now, how to read the book? That is where I said, okay, in the beginning, yeah, maybe you start with chapter 1, 2, or 3, so have the linear approach of that book, but that is maybe not the only one, right? So we have that one, that's our traditional area that we say, okay, you start with an introduction, with the framework, etc., and then we have a second part of all the use cases. Use cases, we talked to a couple of people and say, okay, this is why we bought the book. So therefore, we have defined a reading experience like the blue line, okay, where you maybe start a bit with an overview of the framework and then you jump into the use cases and maybe ignore the details of functional integration because that was how we would work with the PMO. It's a very specialized chapter. You might want to skip that if the practice, this practical use case is more important for you. Well, I think while we had been written the book, I think LeanX acquisition happened. So we went back to the author, to a suppressor, hey, we need to add another part of that one. So, and if tools, enterprise architecture tools is important, then you can even hop on the orange line and say, hey, yeah, maybe you read the generic tool chapter and then go through the specifics of LeanX. So that's then the orange line for you to jump on to get the tool experience. We don't stop there, so because we also said, okay, put things in practice or establish in an enterprise architecture practice. Practice is the fourth dimension of our framework. If you are interested in that one, you should have a solid foundation on the framework. You should also understand what are other functions doing, because if you don't integrate your practice with the other functions, you're missing something out. So I think, therefore, the golden line would then focus on these areas, these different chapters. And then I think there is a part 5, which is more the next big thing or conclusions, key trends and outlooks. most books start with. And then we thought maybe, well, an experienced enterprise architecture, who's okay, what are the nice, interesting candies? So we have a purple line, that's a special chapter reading experience, which is, I think, experienced enterprise architects, they might say, okay, that we think is unique, maybe cloud transformation, or maybe you pick exactly those transformations you are interested in. Enterprise architecture at SAP, this is where we describe the different practices we have in SAP, and next trends, those are special chapters, right? So it's special readings. When I would pick up a book, I would look exactly for only special chapters, because I'm so long in that thing, I wouldn't want to read another chapter on the methodology maybe. So that is our way on how we think how to read the book. And then what is in the book, Anup, you take us through that one, right? Yes.
So the previous chapters, I know a lot of hard work went in. Thank you for putting together. But which chapter is the most complicated or complex chapter for you guys to put together?
Well, I think that's a good question. Now you could argue who wrote which chapter, right? So don't ask that. Okay. No, that's a top secret thing, right? So I think maybe we have different opinions on that one as well, right? So. Some people say that this one is a bit theoretical, but I think for me, it's a very important one. I wrote that chapter, yes, I admit. But I think, what would you say?
I think the most difficult chapter was chapter number 17, because that's looking into future. So what next big trends in architecture do we see? So we were looking there a bit in our crystal ball and taking some trends that are already out there, like quantum computing and other stuff that's going on, and then we thought about, okay, how does that impact enterprise architecture in future, and maybe also what could be additional trends. So I think that was tough to write down, because it's a lot forward-looking, a lot speculation.
Thank you. Thank you for the question, though.
And Peter, one comment on this metro line that you came up. We see a lot of thought process and engineering behind it. Now, you also had some other books towards the end, right? Reference books like the Signavio and...
That SAP Press put it.
I see. Okay. So I was wondering if there was any metro map from here to there.
Okay, now that's
There were some more pages on the Signavio and the other book, Activate and all that. Yeah, I got it. Yeah. Okay, let's move forward. Thank you, Peter. So this has been quite an experience also to write the book, the whole journey, right? And we had a lot of debates, like Peter said, right? So how to maybe like what? I think together we have like 65 years of experience. so so it's like we have not only have enterprise architecture experience, but we have our own background, right? So where we came from. So it's kind of a professional experience which we try to put it in here. So what is inside the book? This is inside the book, right? So you can see everything has been documented in different chapters where we have seen enterprise architecture from the field. So I can at least guarantee one thing, that we have a hardcore field experience based on which we tried to come up with all these concepts and tied the knot with how SAP sees it, and then that's how we have brought the whole content.
Any questions on these?
Is that loaded into Joule for consultants?
Maybe they're the next edition. Okay. So yeah, so that's the holistic thing on the what's inside the book. But this is, by now you might have mugged it up, right? So this we have been showing in every session. But what we thought is, since you already have got the book, let's go a little deeper on 2 use cases, at least in this time frame, right? So I will take one of them, and Johannes will cover one of them. That's exactly the experience which we have seen in various customers. So again, you can figure out that, oh, this may be my customer, this may be my customer, but the reality is we kind of mixed up some scenarios just to make it a little generalized, so we don't give the real customer name, but those are real customer experience. And what is inside this chapter, especially which we wanted to cover, is we have structured in this way, right? So there is a business context, which we have said for that use case. There is an IT context, And then what's that problem statement? Maybe if you look at it, you may see a different problem statement from architecture perspective, right? So what we have gone through, that's what we have articulated. This is the problem statement for this use case. And then how do we apply the EA transformation approach or EA framework, right? Because that may look little theoretical, and that's what some of the readers have given a feedback. And that's also, if you read TOGAF, you see too much of theory, but how does it apply? So we try to apply this framework in that use case. And then the key thing is customer would look for an outcome, would look for a deliverable, or what we call in EAF as artifact, right? So what's the outcome which we are coming up for this use case? And then of course we have summarized in the end. So that's, you will see the logical structure for each use case. Now let me take another use case now, because I think we have covered in various sessions, business transformation, cloud transformation, sustainability. So let me take this example of M&A. So M&A can be, and of course, if you have the book, you will see the outcome deliverable there. I just want to give the context and the problem statement which we try to address in this use case, right? So M&A can be looked at from two dimensions, right? So if you are on the buyer side or you are on the seller side, so the context changes. And then if you see right from preparation, depending on which phase of M&A you are in or you get called in as an enterprise architect, your access to information would be limited, right? Because it's a very confidential M&A. Maybe enterprise architect may not be called at the pre-deal phase, just as an example. But if you see, LeanIX has also published a survey to see where does SAP Enterprise Architect plays a role more. So I think in the book you have a link also on that survey as well. So if you see, we have tried to structure it depending on each of these phases, from whether you're from the buyer side or seller side, you will have a different activity to do to help that M&A deal. Yeah. So that's the flow which we usually go through, and depending on which, when the customer calls us to do some assessment, we see whether he's on the buyer side or on the seller side, and that's how it we address that problem. Now, so that's the LeanIX survey, which is the link which I was talking about. You can see at almost 90%, most EAs are involved in M&A activities to support post-merger integration, because they have already decided, they may be in the TSA agreement, and then they say, okay, how does these two landscape talk to each other, or how do we integrate? What is the best of the two worlds? So that is the survey, which it's a little old survey, but there could be a new one as well, but it gives a good picture for how enterprise architects are seen in the M&A situation. Now, the use case which is in the book, so there are two use cases you will see, one from the divestiture use case and one from the acquisition use case. So the divestiture use case, so we generalize it SpinCo, FarmCo, and NewCo, so you can merge co, so you can relate easily what's the final status of the merger and acquisition. But essentially the scenario, the use case one is, you can see here, SpinCo is decided on a transition strategy, so which means the division which is spinning off from your parent company, so they're trying to set up a new landscape, right, new system. So assume that your parent company is in the ECC. Now, when the spinning off to another landscape, logically what should be the target? It should be S/4HANA RISE, right? So that's what SAP will recommend always, right? So that was an opportunity this customer took it, that when they're spinning off, and they spinned off exactly in a S/4HANA environment. Now, the spinning off could also be very tricky, right? Because you have, so I think there are divisions which we have mentioned there. So BU1, BU2, just assume that for a big consumer division company, you're spinning off a pharma division, right? Or if you're a big manufacturing company, you're spinning off a healthcare division, right? So these are two real customers where they did actually. Now, when they're spinning off a consumer division from an overall parent company, they saw that within that landscape, they had some commingled data, right? So they may have multiple instances, but then how do you split that? So, and the exercise what we have done is to decide the transition strategy. So transition strategy was selective data transition out of Greenfield, Brownfield, SDT. But within SDT, we deep dive a little bit what data to take, how much to take, and how do we carve out. So that's the use case one. Acquisition use case is again another use case where you come from the buyer side, where you acquire a company, and then this acquisition could be that you are acquiring a company which is which helps you expand a say, market, say a Mexico market or a Latin America market, or you expand in certain capabilities. So you acquire, like for example, a real use case is, so BMS acquired Celgene, for example, right? So they acquired a cell therapy processes, which is different from BMS manufacturing, generic manufacturing processes, right? So now how do these integrate with the parent company is another situation. So it depends, again, the situation may vary if it is an SAP or non-SAP environment, right? And then if it's SAP to SAP, there could be some more integrational options. But that could be another scenario where we have to draw the target architecture or design the target architecture for a parent company when the acquired company gets merged into that. How would the new target would look like? So there are many cases you might have gone through. Now, these are the two use cases, but just to map it with our EA framework, so as you might have seen our North Star architecture session, so we used these modules for the use case 1. So we looked at their strategy assessment, and then we looked at which capability would kind of spin off, and then how would the application architecture target would look like. So if S4 comes in, how other applications would be around that, and then what would be the transition scenario for that. Then for the second use case, for the drawing the target architecture and roadmap, that's a typical target architecture roadmap pattern. But here we stressed a little bit more on the integration side also. So I would leave it at that. Maybe we can take questions later. I'll invite Johannes for the second use case.
Yep. Thank you, Anup. So I would talk about use case on business transformation, and more specifically about business transformation in the automotive industry. So you have heard about all the trends that are happening in different industries, like in automotive, and business transformation happening, like industries are also blurring, so it's not so clear anymore what is an automotive customer, because they also go in battery production, so there can be more like a chemical company also. So there's a lot of things happening not only in automotive but in almost all industries, and if you look at the different LOBs, you can always find topics that are happening now here for automotive, like R&D, electrification, autonomous driving, or if you look at the aftermarket business with predictive maintenance, in-car services, etc. So many of these trends are around for a while already, and they're still imposing some challenges for the automotive industry companies. So now we would look in this use case in one of our fictional customers based on our experience, Fusion Motors. We have named them Fusion Motors, and they are a legacy automotive manufacturer like we have seen in many countries. So they're still a lot in the conventional cars business. But they see a declining revenue in sales, so they have to react on that. They have to react to the market dynamics, to changes in the consumer preferences, etc. So they need to swiftly adapt to these changing environments. The current business model, as I said, is more the traditional business production of cars. The selling part is done with the dealership networks, like it has been done in the past for many automotive customers. And the after-sales service is one of their cash cows, as it is for many automotive customers, where they make the most profit with. But now they have to embark on a business transformation journey, because they need to focus on 3 main items. So one is they need to move to direct-to-consumer sales and digital experience. So as you know, some like Tesla, so you can order already today cars online. You go to a showroom, so you cut off the dealership network that is around for most of the traditional automotive companies. But you also have to think about new mobility concepts, subscription-based ownership of cars, so not buying the car anymore, subscribing to it, so to a bundle of services, etc. And then, of course, sustainability, one of the big topics, and software in general. So from traditional producing cars now also to producing software is a big shift for most of the automobile customers. The baseline architecture, so they come, like many of our customers, from a heavy modified or customized ECC landscape with several instances all over the globe. They have faced problems with the agility, so adapting to such business needs in the legacy landscape is not easy, because to bring innovation in very customized systems is a hard job. So now they have to think about the best transformation approach. And just as Anup has mentioned, we apply here as well our North Star methodology. So selecting the right modules out of our North Star service that we provide. And here it's, as you can see here, because we're talking about business transformation, so we're talking a lot about strategy and business architecture domain. Less on the technology part. This is also very important. If you plan out the transformation, you also have to look at technology, but you need to get started somewhere. And we recommend always to start with the most important topic at the beginning, and then in the second iteration take the others in. So that's why we say, first of all, you need to connect the strategy to the business architecture and application architecture. And how did we do that here? So what we used is something called business model patterns. This comes is a research-based pattern library from the University of St. Gallen in Switzerland initially. So they have looked at hundreds and thousands of companies and their different business models, and then they came up with a library of patterns, around 70 patterns, how you could describe and decompose a business model. And some of those patterns are mentioned here, like e-commerce, subscription-based business model, direct selling business model. So you find that also online. This library is available online. And what we have done as a first step is we need to understand what are the business model patterns that the company has today and what are the changing business model patterns. So like here, subscription-based business model pattern for the passengers cars business, but maybe not for the luxury cars business that the customer also provides. So you look at the group, also at the entire company, and then you have to also map it down where which business model pattern would apply to. And if we now say, okay, let's focus for a moment on the subscription business model, what is now the impact on my architecture? So the next step is, as you know, we have to connect strategy with business architecture. So now we have to move over to the business capabilities. So again, for subscription, what are the most critical business capabilities that I need? Of course, you need always accounts payable, accounts receivable, and so on, but this is not a key strategic capability for this business model. But here in that case, you need to have something like customer order and contract management. You need to have service fulfillment especially, so service billing, service closure, service consumption management, service execution. You need to bundle that in solution orders. So you need maybe a new set of business capabilities that you have not yet in your company today. And you can see here we also did like a scoring, so you can score from 1 to 4 what is the highest impact of this business capability to this business model pattern, and then based on the scoring, then at the end you just filter maybe on the most important ones, like now the highest ones rated with 4, and then focus on those when you design the next steps of your architecture. So the scoring is done here based on experience, but we also now looking into generative AI to do the scoring in an automated way. And then the next step, so once we have now defined, okay, I need a subscription-based model. Now I know what business capabilities I need for that. And now the next step is, as you know, maybe already, now we have to link the business capabilities to applications. So this is also done then with our reference content, because the business capabilities come from the reference business architecture from SAP. And the same way also the mapped solutions to the business capabilities, they also come from our reference catalog, the reference solution architecture. And now we can say, okay, if I need marketing execution and I need marketing campaign management, loyalty management, what would be the right solutions from an SAP perspective? Then we can map them down, like here the Marses as an opportunity. But we also, of course, in real life, we also map to non-SAP solutions. Here we just mentioned non-SAP because it's from the book, so we didn't want to put any name here, but in reality we would put then the name where you have implemented it, Salesforce, whatever. And then at the end we come up with a holistic product map based on the business capabilities that we need. And then actually we can go further. We can then design the target application architecture based on these products. How does the integration work? Have an integration discussion, looking into the roadmap and so on. So cover the rest of that. But that's something you can read in the book. So we have explained that. So that's why I stop here on that part. And yeah, happy then also to receive some of your questions.
Can you just comment a few comments on the value management, how you go about doing that?
Yeah, so the value management aspect here is looking from a value driver perspective. So we're going from the strategy, from what are the strategic priorities, goals, and then mapping the value drivers to that, so that we then can link that again with the business capabilities and have the connection from the value driver to the business capability to see what value driver is influencing what business capability, or what business capability, just the reverse, is impacting then the value driver. So
would there be a decision making between those two as you link them between the value drivers and the business capability? Are there certain decisions that you make as a result of that?
what do you mean with decisions?
Now you are linking the value drivers, right?
Yes.
So like, are you kind of scoring a value driver, certain value drivers more important than
Yes, we would. So based on the strategy, there are always certain areas where the focus should be on, and then we can highlight that and focus on that, and then again focusing on the business capabilities and the architecture impacting that. So that's something what we typically do there. Yep. Okay, so are there further questions on not only on that use case but in general? Yes.
Does the content of the book address SAP EA certification?
We
Not much.
not directly. So, but as you have seen, the book content has a lot about the enterprise architecture framework and all the components, and also the use cases leverage the same methodology. So if you read the book, then you already know a lot about what is asked in the certification, but it's not designed as a preparation for this certification, but similar content. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, for certification, it's more application-based questions, so that would help, right? If you read the part 1 and then the use cases, so you know how to apply, that helps in the preparation. But as you said, it's not a direct intent to feed in for certification.
Thank you.
On the framework slide, I think you said, I thought, other way. You said began with the most important, I believe when you were talking on, well, probably not this slide, the map slide. I'm probably calling it wrong.
That one here? Okay.
Sorry. I think you said something about starting with the most important. Is
Okay.
that not a sequential thing of left to right? I'm missing that. I've been through
yeah.
these modules and I'm missing this. Is this a sequential thing or no?
It is not sequential. I mean,
I
maybe
wanna understand how you start without a strategy.
at the beginning it's a bit sequential. Yeah, you typically start with the strategy, right?
Yes.
So that's a starting point, but it doesn't mean always that you, especially when you're coming to the yellowish, brownish area, that you then have always to go like that or like that. So there are different paths, and we know that is now, if you're not experienced with those modules, to select the right modules can be a challenge. But that's why, I'm not sure if you attended the session yesterday, that's why we have defined patterns. So like for business transformation, sustainability, merchants acquisition, then we exactly tell you what are the modules required and what is the flow of the modules, how to start and how to end.
And it also depends on when are we called in, right? So if an SI has done all of this, sometimes in the end, okay, SAP, could you come in and just say yes? No, okay, well, then I think everything was already built out, right? So also to be clear, right? So we probably are not McKinsey. We are not defining the business strategy for the company, but we need to understand the business strategy of the company and then draw the conclusions out of that one. Other questions?
Yeah, I had a question for you. Before that, let me address the certification question. There is a session today at 4:30 in track 2,
Yeah.
which addresses the certification. Make sure you attend that.
He's one of the organizer, by the way. That's so yeah, thank you. No, that's the correct one. So there is one of our colleagues is presenting there. So yeah.
Anup, I had a question on your M&A solution, right? You mentioned usually enterprise architecture won't get plugged in until the decision is made. Like, say for example, you are a resident EA and you're asked
In that customer, yeah.
Yeah, how would you have, let's say, impacted the decision or influenced some of these things ahead of time?
No, that's correct. So if you are part of that company where, I mean, Peter can also share, right, his experience, I know. But so basically, if you are part of that company, then you may be called in right at the pre-deal phase or even at the preparation phase. Then you have to get into that strategy and planning or market analysis and target identification. Maybe Peter, you have a real example.
Well, I was more on the divested. No,
Okay.
I was on the acquired side,
Yeah,
right? So I
yeah.
was in part of Gillette when P&G acquired us. But I think I think what we as enterprise enterprise architects can do is we can lay out, okay, what are the different types of acquisitions, large buying small, large with large, or different business type, same business type, only for products, only, and then saying what are the typical ways forward. So I worked back with my old employer at P&G. When they did their S4 transformation, they said, okay, what is an architecture which helps us in the future when further acquisitions come to be more agile? Well, it's also not one fits all. And again, it depends on what type of business they acquire, right? So therefore, it's not the one fits all. But I think if we are working on that one as we speak, not yet maybe that detailed, because here in the book we have concrete examples, but we are working on I wouldn't say a framework, but on an approach which it gives us a bit of an overview. What are the typical things and what are then the patterns we see, right? Is it just retire the old systems? I worked for a company in Turkey which acquired another subsidiary of a US company for the same regions. They recognized that the acquired company had a better IT and they dismantled their own IT, at least they thought about it, and go to the IT of the acquired company. Very unusual. I did with P&G, it was the opposite. So we had SAP in North America for order to cash. P&G was on mainframe. They put all of Gillette on mainframe to harmonize. And then 2 years later, we went to SAP, right? So it was sometimes when it depends on the priorities, right? When one phase to the customer is priority, maybe then mainframe is the first step before then later going to SAP.
So maybe one just to add to that. So right now there is a assessment which we are doing. So there is a company who acquired a smaller company who they are completely on non-SAP, right? And that's where probably S/4HANA public cloud comes in. And that's where maybe two-tier architecture comes in. So we have a special pattern, special use case section in the chapter where we have also explained that two-tier architecture and split architecture and on our point of view. So that would also help if you read the book. And I think it's also a perception, like he said, right? We are not McKinsey, so they see us like when they bring SAP Enterprise Architect, we may only push for SAP applications, right? So that's why the SAP IT, they see it like an SAP IT function. So that's why probably even the survey which LeanIX did, that's what it says. But I think I think Peter, we have been discussing, right? So we can come in here, but then that phase is pretty confidential at that side, right? So how many people they will involve is another question, unless you are in that company. So yeah.
And I was just going to comment on this from a business architecture standpoint. You may even have the opportunity, if you're really lucky, to be involved in that, in the identification of target acquisitions because of common capabilities or desired capabilities, and also help make sense of all that other stuff and how hard it's going to be down the road. And the other, which is great fun when you do actually get in there. But the other thing I was going to comment on, Peter, your honeycomb picture that I've seen before, because the question of is it linear or not, I think it's an opportunity to point out those far right columns, policy, change management, those kind of things happen all throughout. And you have to be aware as enterprise architects of the parameters of which you're the maturity, everything under practice and governance, as well as some of that I'll say policies, but then also the change management stuff and roadmap and transition isn't just implementation; it's up in front as well.
And I think if you have the methodology piece, the governance practices underneath going across.
That's more.
And I think here it just was a layout question.
No, it's great. I've had the same challenge, so I know when I lay it out.
No, but you're
Just to add, I mean it's a valid point. So especially for organizational change, so that's actually something that you have in a lot of those honeycombs. Because if you talk from a business architecture perspective, you have a change impact, right? So if you talk about business process changes or new capabilities coming in, that's an OCM topic, from a change impact analysis or risk perspective as well. And the same goes then for maybe if you look even in the technical deployments, so where you deploy the solutions is again risk topic. So it's across the modules, right?
So can you go back to the mergers and acquisitions? This one, yeah, that one, yeah. I come from the public sector world, so we have mergers without acquisitions. We have divestments without acquisitions. Choices of government we're going to restructure our org charts in whatever way. We're going to merge departments. We're going to split departments into two departments. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, very, very similar. So, right now we are looking at basically a technical rationalization. We have a lot of old ECC environments that are on-premise. We have some S4 environments that are in the Azure cloud, and we are trying to bring departments and modernize and standardize the technology. What can we learn from your mergers experience and from your carve-out experience, if we ever get told to carve something out later, that we can apply to that public sector type of landscape where we're really reorganizing company codes and technologies, but without the sort of business transformation, because the business is more about our key thing is not growth. It's about continuity of business, stability that making sure people's pension checks get cut every on time. So what can we learn from this kind of M&A activity when we're trying to do our transformation in that very different kind of business?
So maybe I can add something. So in the book, we are specifically talking about these kind of scenarios, but I think your question relates. So we have a team within SAP called SAP DMLT team, Data Migration and Landscape Transformation. They work very closely on these situations like the company code merger or carve out or currency conversion, those kind of, there are different use cases within that. How do you take your data for one department and take it to another landscape or within the organization, right? But I don't think so we covered those kind of scenarios, but the approach and the methodology could be similar. That's what I would say at this moment. But the use cases are typically these kind of stuff. Yeah, thank you.
How are we time-wise?
I think we are on time. Yep. Any
On
last
time.
question?
Any last question? No, you're eager to go out and read the book. Okay, that's good. So thank you for coming by, and yeah.
So maybe one last page. So those who have not bought the books, we were the #1 in SAP Press so far. So we are leading. So you can buy the book if you have not bought the book yet.
Or you can also write an
feedback, comment,
feedback on
feedback.
Amazon.com, right?
Yes.
So we have zero
Yeah.
feedback there. It's just a small one. We would love to see it, right? So
we want to get the second edition out, so we need feedbacks, right? So
yeah, and reach us also out if you. I think we got already some feedback.
Yes.
Well, this could be better.
Yeah.
Nothing is perfect in the first place. Yeah.
Thank you so much for
Thank
the
you.
opportunity. Thank you.